Hi everyone. The goal of this video is to give you an overview on how you can use our automation workflow to automate a lot of the repetitive tasks or routines in your practice. Everything starts with this concept of when X happens, which is the trigger, and X is the trigger, you want Y, which is one or more set of actions to take place. We're going to go over some of the example scenarios, how you can automate creation of tasks, whether it's assigning tasks to one or more of your employees based on a procedure code that is either completed in an appointment or scheduled in an appointment. Or you can also set up post-op call reminder tasks based on procedure codes. All right. And we'll look at some examples of how you can automate sending emails and or texts based on triggers, for example, for post-op instruction emails, or also post-op instruction text with link to websites. All right, so let's get started. The way to get started to start using automation workflow is on the left side navigation menu, you will have this little icon. Almost looks like a tree, computers in a tree icon. It'll say, if you hover over it, it will say workflow builder. If you don't see this icon on your navigation, you should refresh. You should do a hard refresh by holding down Control Shift and the refresh icon on your browser, or Control Shift and R on your browser. You should see this icon. If you click on it, and you will see this page here. If you have not created any workflows, you'll see something like this: no workflows found, and click here to create one. Okay, or if you've got something created already, you may see something like this, where you have the workflows and the triggers there and whether or not they're active. All right, so don't worry about how this got here. Let's go back to our screen here and imagine you're a new user and trying to implement this functionality. So let's start by creating a new example workflow. And before you do it, you kind of have to think about what is it that you want done and what is the trigger. So in this example that I'm going to show you, what I would like to do is whenever my clear aligner patient comes in for their records visit, whether it's for clear aligner records that you're doing in-house through 3D printing or for something like Invisalign. So if you're doing Invisalign records, what I want to have happen is once the patient is checking out, once the appointment is marked completed by my front desk, I would like to have a task assigned to one or more of my clinical assistants in the back that would remind them to prep and send the case to Invisalign or prep to send case to ArchForm. So I don't have to worry about it. All right. And it will stay on their task list until that task is done, and because they have to mark it completed. All right. So let's go ahead and do that. So the way to start a new workflow is you would click this button here, new workflow. It'll open up another tab. And basically what you're going to see here on the left side is the first two tabs are triggers and actions. Triggers is the first thing that you need to select. So in this case, I want to have something happen when an appointment is completed. So I'm going to click on this option, drag it over to the screen. All right. Then head over to Actions tab. And what I'm trying to do is assign a Teamio task. So I'll go ahead and drag it onto the screen until I see this little blue dot and drop it. All right. And then you can just actually click on that little section that says assign Teamio task. That would bring up this little detailed panel where you can assign properties. So what I mean by that is this. So we discussed that we want this to be done when a patient completes a clear aligner or aligner records visit. So assuming you have a custom code already created within Open Dental, if you have not done so, you would do that first and then come back here. So for example, in this instance, I already have a custom code created within Open Dental called Clear Aligner. You can just start to search for it, and you don't have to type the whole thing in. It's auto suggest search, so it should pop up. So here's the custom code. And what I want to do is assign a task to my clinical team. Let's say there are 2 assistants in the back. You could just assign it to one, doesn't matter. I'm going to assign it to these 2 clinical assistants, and the task description is going to be this: prep, design, and submit case to ArchForm. The task due date, I'm going to set it to immediately, but I do have an option of selecting it as 1 day after appointment is completed, 2 days, or 1 week. The reason why I want to do it immediately, because I want the task to be created immediately, and it doesn't matter if the due date is tomorrow, but I definitely want to create immediately, and so it grabs their attention. So I'm going to select immediately here. I don't have a wiki document created that shows, basically it's like an SOP document you could have created that goes over, how to do this task. If you're onboarding a new team member and they don't know how to prep and design the case on the computer, then you could have an SOP document where you could just do a screen recording, post it on YouTube, and then actually have a Teamio wiki page created, and then you could tag that wiki page here. and then would be associated with this automated task. We'll discuss that another time. So that's it. You select the code, select the one or more team members, put in the description of the task, and select the due date when you want the task to be due, and go ahead and hit save. That will save it. You can click out of here. Now remember, if you click this, because you saved it, it will pop up again. Okay, I'm just going to save it again. You don't have to. I'm just showing you. Click X. You have not, if you exit out of this page, you will lose all the information. So what you want to do, you want to save the workflow. Whenever you edit anything on this screen, you want to make sure you hit the save workflow button. Here it's asking you to create a name for this workflow. It doesn't matter. You could just put in as temp, workflow one, whatever. I don't even put in unique names. It doesn't matter. All right, once the workflow is saved, now remember, there's a button here, activate workflow. All right, I'm going to leave this window open for a second and just show you what that looks like. Let's look at the workflow page right now. Here it is, the workflow name that you created, what trigger it is, and you can notice that under active, it's not active yet, okay? So you haven't turned it on yet. So when you're first creating a workflow, you want to click this button here. So activate workflow, or you could do it outside. All right, so now you've successfully activated the workflow. If you don't activate it, it basically doesn't kick off, even if you expect it to kick off, because it's not active. So let's go ahead and close it out. I'm going to refresh the page here, and it should be, as you can see, active. Or you could have just toggled it on here. All right. If you ever want to modify it, you would click on Modify Workflow here and add basically anything that you need to from here. One thing to keep in mind that once you have one trigger, let's say appointment completed, you cannot have more than one appointment completed trigger. So for example, if you're looking at this screen, you're not going to have appointment completed. You can't have that. You can only have one appointment completed workflow. But underneath that, you could have multiple things that are happening. All right, and we'll get into that in a little bit. All right, so here's what we have created. Everything is saved here. All right, if you needed to change, you could add more, et cetera, et cetera. All right. All right, so for now, I've created one workflow. Now let's go ahead and test it out, okay? And where we would see the result for the workflow that kicks in. All right, so for now, I'm just gonna take on this task page. Now, let's go back to Open Dental. Now remember, this workflow should kick off whenever an appointment is created. For example, I guess, take a patient. And remember, this is gonna kick off when I have clear aligner records, procedure code assigned to the appointment. So let's say the patient is here, you do the records, photographs, or whatever, and the appointment is done, patient is going to the front checks out the appointment, marks the appointment completed. This is what's going to set off that workflow. You've marked the appointment completed, and that procedure code is attached to it. So basically what that means is that if you go to their account, that procedure code is completed, right? And that's what would kick off this workflow. If I were to go back to my Teamio console here, you just saw in front of you on Teamio tasks, this task just popped up under task created by me because I'm the administrator logged in. Prep, design, and submit case to ArchForm. It tags the patient. It even says appointment completed on which date, and assigns the 2 clinical assistants that you chose when you were creating the workflow. And it actually also tags it as appointment completed. All right. So what will happen is when this task, because I'm the administrator who designed the workflow, it's always going to fall under this section here. But for the 2 clinical assistants, when they should already be seeing this task on their dashboard. If they're signed into Teamio, wherever they are in the office, and they have Teamio task open, they are going to see this exact same task assigned to them. All right. But they are going to see it under section task assigned to me because it's assigned to them. All right. And once they complete it, they can go ahead and mark it completed, et cetera, et cetera. And whoever marks it completed, you can also track that as well. All right. If you need to attach a wiki to it now that it's been created, you can do that here, but just make sure the wiki page is already created on Teamio before you assign to it. All right. You could change the due date, et cetera, et cetera. Remember, in the workflow, we chose the due date of immediately. That's why it says due today. So this task will stay on the screen for these 2 employees until the task is completed. All right. All right. So now let's go back to our workflow. And there's a button here called View Output. It basically tells you when a workflow ran from the rules you indicated. So if I were to click on it, here's one workflow that ran successfully, and it shows you that, okay, you don't have to worry about this ID, but this task prep design submit case to ArchForm, which I just showed you, it did, the result was the task was created, all right, the created by, who was created by, okay, and assigned to Radhika and Sohali. And then when it last ran, was it this time? Was it successful? Yes or no? All right. It'll say the same thing for whether you're sending an email, text, etc. And we'll come back to that. So let's go ahead now back to the workflow page. Now I have a workflow created, appointment completed. But what if I want to go ahead and modify it? Because I want, for the same trigger, whenever an appointment is completed, I want to do certain things. And again, I want to continue on an assigned Teamio task. But what I would like to now do is same thing for a mouth guard. For example, I believe it's D9944. All right, here it is. These are all codes that already exist on OpenDental. What I would like to do is assign a task to my clinical assistant to design on Medit and then print. Okay, and I do want that to be due immediately. If you have an SOP page, you can do that here as well. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and save it. All right, and while I'm on this page, you can create other rules here as well. Like, for example, one of our offices, which is pretty large, they have 4 full-time doctors, 4 full-time hygienists, multiple specialists under one roof. They do have a CERAC in-house. They do a lot of milling of crowns, but they do not insert the case the same day because of the large volume of patients they see. So what they have done is they've created a workflow for example, 2740, any ceramic crowns that they do, they have assigned a workflow. So they have a dedicated clinical assistant that only does this task because they do quite a bit of crowns. That's why they're doing it in-house. And then it basically, the task will probably say something like design, crown, mill, glaze, and ready to insert, whatever. Okay. And it's due immediately. All right. The reason why this is important, because when there's lots of things happening within the practice, you don't want things falling through the cracks. This specific task will stay on that assistant's dashboard on Teamio task until the task is completed. And it will even tag the patient within that task, like I showed you earlier. All right. So let's just say we're going to go ahead and save this. All right. Again, you're modifying the workflow, you added more codes, and you saved it. Right. And then you want to click X. Remember always to save the workflow by clicking Save Workflow. All right. There's no more activating the workflow because the workflow is already activated, right? Now let's go ahead and test that out as well. So let's say the patient is this. I'm going to just say it's a patient is coming in for a mouth guard. Whatever workflow you create and the code you attach is the appointment I'm making. So let's say this patient is coming in scheduled for a mouth guard. They completed the mouth guard. I'm going to set it complete. And then we're going to head over back to the Teamio console page. Let's go over to the task page. All right. And the task is already there. Right here, design on Medit, and then print tags the patient, appointment completed September 2nd, and assign it to the actual clinical assistant who this task is assigned to. All right, so I hope this is making sense. As long as you can basically think of many scenarios in this, all right? I've just given you a few examples. You can think of whatever fits your practice and your model, and you can create custom codes. You can use the ones you already have in OpenDental. Just make sure if you're going to use custom codes, just make sure they're already there within the codes for OpenDental. If you need to create one, you would create one here. And then before you go back to the workflow, if you've already got it open, just do a hard refresh to make sure that we have that updated custom code that you created. Just hit Control-Shift Refresh on this screen. And then when you go in to modify the workflow, make sure the code that you created is on the list. All right. So I hope that's helpful. So that's for appointment completed. So what if you have another trigger? What if you have another trigger that you want to use, like appointment scheduled instead of appointment completed? So let's give you an example scenario that walks us through the same thing. So for example, new workflow. I'm going to drag. Look what happens when I drag appointment completed. Okay, it says you already have a workflow with the same trigger. You cannot create a new workflow. Please go back and edit the existing workflow. So like I mentioned earlier, since you already have the appointment completed trigger going, you can't create another workflow under the same. You can actually put all the workflows under one trigger. Okay, that's the whole point. So now let's get out of this screen here. You just exit out, just say new workflow. You're gonna go ahead and go appointment scheduled, action. Again, we're gonna go back to Teamio task. We're gonna assign a task. Now, the example that I wanna show you is this. One of the offices that we have, they do a lot of non-intravenous constant sedation. So what they were doing, the doctor didn't know how to do this, but they were manually creating Teamio tasks when they first started using Teamio to go ahead and call the prescription for a patient a few days before their appointment. So the doctor would, whenever the appointment is made, they would just go and create Teamio task. That, hey, call in prescription for this patient a couple days before, because they would the patient would need to take it prior to their appointment for sedation. So instead, I told them they could just automate it. So whenever the patient is scheduled for a certain appointment that match certain codes, for example, they were doing it for surgical extractions, implant placement, et cetera, et cetera. So what you can do is, let's say you come to here, we already selected appointment scheduled. Now you can select the actual code. So for example, surgical exo, let me see, extraction. Okay, here it is, 7210. Let's just select multiple, 7140, 7210. All right, even for implant, D6110. Now, when I assign the task to my clinical assistant, or it could be front desk, whoever you decide to do it, and the description of the task is going to be something like this: call in RX for patient, call in RX for sedation. That's it. It will automatically tag the patient that's going to be associated with this task, so I don't have to worry about that. So call in RX for sedation. Task due date, it's not going to be immediately when the appointment is scheduled. You can actually have it done this way: one day before the appointment date, or 2 days before the appointment date, or 1 week before. You could have it just do it immediately. As soon as the appointment is scheduled, it will assign this task. But again, you could select one of these options as well. But let's just, for now, for testing purposes, we'll leave it as immediately. Okay. Attach a wiki. You could attach a wiki document if you needed to, et cetera, et cetera. All right. And then we're going to hit save. All right. Again, I forgot to mention something, that there is a code for non-intravenous constant sedation. So it'll be this 9248. So usually the doctors that were scheduling this in their practice, they were bundling this code along with all the extraction, their implant appointments. So 9248, whenever that kicks off, either one of these codes would kick this off anyways. All right. So that's what this means. If the patient is just coming in for a simple extraction, it would still kick this workflow off, or a combination of these. All right. That's what that means. So let's just go ahead and save. If you decided that you only wanted to take off if the 9248, just cancel out the other ones. All right. So let's go ahead and save it. I think we already did. And X out. And remember to save the workflow. You could just call it temp 2, doesn't matter. Now we do want to click on activate workflow. All right, and that should set up the workflow. If I were to close it out and refresh this page, which shows me all my workflows, I should see the 2 different triggers that I have. Yep, I have the 2 different triggers, and they are both active. All right, let's go ahead and actually test them out. So let's just schedule for an extraction, create new appointment. Hopefully I selected this code. Not sure if I did. Let's just check it. 7210, November 6. All right, so now that we scheduled it, that's what's gonna kick off that trigger of scheduling that task. So let's make sure that task is created automatically for us. Let's go to tasks. And there it is. It just popped up in front of you. Call in RX for sedation for patient. This is the patient that was tagged, because that's the patient who has the appointment. That's the appointment date. And it even tells you the appointment date and who the person is assigned to, all right, to the task, all right. And basically, if you have any more details, you can put it in there as well. All right, so that's that. So now you have 2 triggers: appointment completed and appointment scheduled. You can think of many scenarios in your practice that would fit this model. And if you can make it happen within Open Dental, you can make it happen on the workflow. All right. I did want to show you guys a quick example of how I'm doing this in my practice. I actually do use Teamio automation workflow to send out automated review texts and emails to my patients when an appointment is completed. We don't send it to all. Let's say a patient has had a good interaction with my front desk or anyone in the clinical team in the back. We would simply just double click and we created a custom cold code review. As long as that's attached to the appointment, and when the patient walks out, when the appointment is walked out by completing, it would set off that workflow. The workflow isn't created yet. So let's just show you how. So let's go ahead and modify our workflow. So appointment completed, that's the trigger. I'm going to go ahead and modify the workflow now. And it's not assigned Teamio task. The action is going to be, let's just say we want to send a text to the patient. So send text. I would click on it. If a procedure code matches any appointment that's completed, that has a review code attached to it, we're going to send an SMS to that patient. So I've already created the wiki template on here. So I'm just going to search for it. It's here, review SMS, and I want it to send immediately. Okay. And I'm going to hit send. Let me show you what the wiki template looks like. Let's make sure the page is open. Here it is. I already have it open. If I go into my wiki pages, this is what the review SMS wiki template looks like. It's tagged as SMS template by this check mark, which is a requirement if you're going to use a wiki for templates for either sending out through email or text. So Mindento, patient first name. I'd love to get your feedback from if you visit on. It puts in the appointment date. Here's a link to leave a review on Google. And this is where you would put in a link. You could link to anything here. This is where you create links. All right. And you could put in the actual Google review link there. All right. And hit save. And these are the variables that you are able to use as long as they are available within the context of what you're trying to do. It will insert the value in there. All right. So basically, that's how that would work. I'm not going to test it. This is a test machine. I don't have the SMS enabled on my test machine, but that's how it would work. It would automatically send a text to that patient upon completion of that review code. So I'm going to stop here. There's lots of possibilities, as I mentioned earlier. To get started, just think about all the things that you think need to happen but fall through cracks. If you can associate it with a procedure code attached to a trigger like appointment scheduled, completed on OpenDental, you can create a workflow out of it. All right. I hope this was helpful.